Let me first of all come to you immediately. Patrick, here in the studios, you have looked at the Mo Ibrahim Index. You've also learned, of course, that there is no big winner this year.
Yes.
What is your immediate reaction to that?
It's not really that surprising in terms of what we saw on the program, in the beginning of the program. Essentially, Africa is still a work in progress. That's how one can safely describe it. As we saw, many significant improvements have come about in the last number of years, but there is still some work to be done. Issues of human rights, accountability, rule of law are still elusive to the continent. And I think some of these have to do with the way that Africa has practiced its democratic structures. It has, of course, invariably been forced to actually move towards multi-party democratic systems from the authoritarian regimes that had been common in Africa from the 1960s on. But that process and progress is still somewhat wanting because, of course, it is one thing to change authoritarian leaders into those that can organize multi-party elections. It's another to make them actually believe in the principles that will bring about real entrenched democratic practices.
But what about the fact that when we talk about the prize, Patrick, we are talking about someone that has left office, someone that respected, protected his nation's constitution, did not violate it, someone that provided, distinguished leadership to his people, and frankly, someone that had been elected democratically and handed over power peacefully. Are you suggesting, frankly, that there is no such a person on the continent as we talk today?
What I'm suggesting is actually the same thing I think Mo Ibrahim was suggesting. Yes, there may be leaders that come close enough, but close enough is not good enough. What we want in Africa today are leaders that will move and step up to the plate and be real leaders for everyone, not just a select few.
I see.
And that is what is lacking. So yes, we do have leaders that have actually emerged democratically elected and then served their terms and left office. But sometimes, and I'm sure the board that was looking at the indexes and so on, and the candidates saw that there were certain areas in which some of the candidates in the pool were wanting or found wanting. And that's the issue here.
Eric, what about from your vantage point, of course, being part of the foundation, what sort of candidates did you consider? Are you in a position to name names, for example?
Well, thank you very much, Shaka, and I'm really pleased to be part of this and to listen to Professor Ukata really give a perspective that you don't hear very often. Very impressed to hear that Africa is work in progress. And this is at the, this is the underlying factor in all of this, that we are not so much concerned about where countries are, where the region is. We're concerned with where countries are going, where the region is going. Yes, I can't give you names because the board, the committee, the prize committee, does not tell us. They're an independent committee and they do not tell us who they've examined. But I think even you as a journalist, Shaka, you ought to be in a position to know who came into consideration. The criteria are fairly clear. Who left office in the last 3 years? who left after a democratically, serving, who respected the Constitution, who served his or her mandate and left office as they should have, and did something significant for their countries. It's fairly easy to determine who the nominees were. You may not realize this, but in the last 3 years, at least 20 individuals have held high office, either as an executive prime minister or head of state. Out of that group, a few, very, very few, actually served as elected presidents, heads of state, heads of government, and left office democratically. But that's homework that you can do if you haven't done it yet.
Now, Eric, how do you respond with someone who might say, what about former Ghanaian President John Kufuor, a man who happens to be a recipient of the World Food Prize, along with, of course, the celebrated former Brazilian President Lula da Silva?
Well, again, I can't name names, and I cannot speak for this independent jury, this independent panel that takes into consideration a vast array of considerations, of elements, that they take into consideration in determining who wins the prize. President Kufuor certainly did not come up for consideration this time around because he's been out of office for over 3 years. And so that's about as much as I can say for President Kufuor. At the time he was in contention, there must have been reasons that the committee considered it did not, should not award the prize to President Kufuor.
What about others who might say, what about Rupiah Banda, former Zambian president?
Well, let's put it this way. I mean, this is a prize for excellence. We've had 3 winners in 6 years. These are 3 laureates that we can hold up to the world and point to their achievements, and what they achieved will stand in any context, in any situation internationally. I think Africa should be proud that we can have 3 leaders who can be put up, and people everywhere looking at their record will say these are deserving leaders, these are examples of excellence. And I think that's really what this comes down to. And the question you and everybody else, me included, should be asking is, how many are there in the world who can be put up as models of excellence? And if Africa can have 3 in 6 years, I think that's amazing. And the hope should be that we should have more. And that's what this award strives to achieve, to encourage others towards this very exclusive club. It has to be exclusive, because that's what excellence is.
And how do you respond to others who also say that there really seems to be a Southern African bias?
Well, the last laureate was President Pires, and he couldn't be further from South Africa than any other leader.
That I understand, but what about the special awards? One that, for example, has gone to South African Bishop Desmond Tutu, and of course former South African President Nelson Mandela.
I can speak to some extent about Archbishop Tutu, whose award is, it's an extraordinary award. It's a one-time award, and it goes to someone around, that has universal. I think I think we all everywhere would agree that he certainly stands out as an African and as a leader in South Africa, on the continent, and even globally. He's a moral figure. So that's, but to speak to your question, I think the fact that this part of the continent has experienced some rather special circumstances in the process of crafting their nations has resulted in special people coming to the fore. Mozambique had to go through a major civil war, and to have come out of that and, you know, brought out a thriving democracy and a thriving economy is amazing. And only, you know, you can see why special people would come out of such circumstances just as much as South Africa.